It's all right. So digital filmmaking. A little ambitious with my super rush video, but I wanted to try to keep the video short. So the last video, we got all of our assets keyed, and I left you off with go keyframe the sword. And now we're going to do some of the more complex stuff here, which really kind of add the details. So the first video is all the basics. Now we're getting to really kind of adding that realism. Or, anyways, again, I'm going to go fast. Please pause and rewind, and go ahead and spend a little bit more time really fleshing out the details, whereas I'm going to approximate. All right, so I left you off with go keyframe the sword, and now your sword being keyframed should look something like this. And again, if you're getting nice and jumpy, what you're going to want to do is go sequence and hit render in and out. It's going pretty fast right now, but we're going to go from about 4 tracks to about 10 tracks of effects, and lots of effects on top of effects on top of effects. So this render time is going to really slow down and get more problematic. So don't render after you do every single change. Render after you do all the main changes. And once again, to do that spot is you go sequence and you hit render in and out. That'll just do your whole entire timeline. Okay. So I got my sword. Now the problem with the sword is that it is going on top of me even though I'm swinging the sword behind me. And so what you do here is you do a little trick. You grab everything but your background image. So all my assets except for my background image, and I'm going to hit Alt or Option and bump it up 1 layer. I can also just drag it up 1 layer, but just like to give you the hotkeys. I'm going to go to the frame right before it cuts behind me, so right that frame, and I could cut me, but I'm going to cut the sword. So I'm going to go to my razor blade or press C, and I'm going to cut it right here. I'm also going to engage snap and make sure that my tracks are all active. There, boom. I'm going to cut. I'm going to play through me and back it up to about that frame. And now all I'm going to do is I'm going to plop that underneath. And that's why I want to do the keyframing first. Otherwise, it gets a little complicated to kind of key it several different times. So the keyframing and everything is continuous. The only thing is now it's going behind me when that happens. Pretty cool, huh? All right. So now it looks like it's embedded, and it doesn't always stay on top of me. It goes behind me, and it's looking better. Okay, a couple more things to do. Another trick to have here is some sort of shadow. And you don't want to do drop shadow like you do Photoshop. What we're going to do for shadow is we're actually going to duplicate me. So I'm just going to hit Command-C, copy, move my scrubber over here, paste it. I'm going to need to move all my assets up again. So hit Option, so I have 1 more empty track. I'm going to put the copy of me right below it. So I really have 2 videos of myself right on top of one another, right? The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to distort it. So if I double click here and I go to position, it can kind of move me out of the way, and I can kind of scale it, but it doesn't really have that like tapering effect that a shadow does. So I need to use another effect. So I'm going to go to my effect tab here. I'm going to scroll up to where it says distort. I'm going to use the effect called corner pin. What corner pin does is it allows me to kind of distort and warp that image. So on my bottom layer here, I'm going to go down to not cropping, not my keyframe. I'm actually going to start hiding them. So don't forget you can click on those triangles to hide or reveal stuff. And I'm going to take my upper left corner and I'm going to drag it down, down, down. And that was to the X. I'm going to drag it to the side, and I'm going to drag it down. Probably too far to the side, something like that. Now, there. Now, I do need to reposition it. So now I'm going to have to go up top here. I'm going to get rid of my keys for positioning. Oops, get rid of them. Yeah. And I'm actually going to, am I going to get rid of my scale? Yeah, I'll get rid of my keys for scale too. And now I can just kind of reposition this to be a little bit more matched up with my legs. And so now this little duplicate of me is going to be my scale. Maybe I want to do a little more work with the corner pin. Something like that. Now, if you're being really nitpicky, you'll notice the light source is coming from here, going this way. So probably my shadow would be off camera, but let's just pretend there's another source behind the camera going this way so we can do this effect. Let's see. So I got to do a few more things. I got to make myself darker. And there's a million ways to do this. The quick way for me to do it is I'm going to go to color correction, choose brightness and contrast, drag it on top of that track. And I'm going to crank the brightness down, and I'm going to crank the contrast down. So I have this nice, very opaque thing. And you might notice that's very dark. So the next thing to do is you can play with the blend modes to make it look semi-transparent. Usually like multiply is good. Gets a little darker and gets a little see-through. And then I like to play with the opacity here. So that it's semi-transparent. I can still kind of see the roots and the creek and everything. Another thing you do is that's a pretty sharp shadow. And you might want a sharp shadow, but most shadows aren't that crisp. So another filter to add on top of this one is going to be the Gaussian blur. I can add the Gaussian blur on top, and it starts you at a base of 0, so you want to increase it. Now, too blurry, it starts to disappear, which is actually going to be important later. Just get a little blur, like maybe 25, and you can still see my arms move around. It's still following me, and I've made this nice cool shadow. All right, last thing is when I fly away, right now, I've deleted the keyframe, so my shadow stays down there. But normally what happens when a person gets closer to a light source or moves up, right, the shadow actually becomes bigger and starts to dissipate. So what I'm going to do is go back to that first place where I start to travel upward, and I got rid of those keys. I'm going to rekey them again. I'm also going to keyframe opacity, and I'm going to establish a key there. And one more key for blur. I'm actually going to keyframe the blurriness as well. So I'm going to go down a few keys. I might not even have to do opacity, but I'm going to just make it a little bit bigger. Because I didn't mess with my anchor point, it's going to shove it off to the side. I'm going to have to reposition it again. Let me get it back up a little more. Something like that. And then maybe a few more frames. Oh, it's gone. Okay. And then the other thing I'm going to do is as it's getting bigger, I'm also going to increase the blurriness. So again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right before it disappears, if I crank this up super big, it starts to really dissipate. So it's almost like I don't. So, and then lastly, I might want to do a little opacity to fade it out. So I'm going to keyframe it again right here, and then a few more frames before it disappears. Just really kind of get rid of that opacity all the way down to 0. So it just kind of does a few things. Do I have to do all of them? No, I could just fade it out probably, it'd be fine. But this makes it look like it's getting bigger and kind of dissipating as I fly out. So that's how you make a shadow. The bell is going to ring here, so I'm going to have to stop again shortly. But the other thing we're gonna play with is glows. So I've got this shadow here that's nice, but the other thing that's happening is I have a fireball right by my face, right? There should be some sort of light effect happening to me. It should be brighter here because a giant flame is right by here than it is here. So I should sort of recreate some sort of artificial lighting effect. And the way we're going to do that for this project, for this time, is we're going to do a mask with color correction. So we got to go to yet another filter, and we're going to be on the top version of Mr. G. So I got my shadow right here, my top one's right here. I'm going to grab color correction. I'm going to go grab Lumetri color. I'm going to plop it on top. Okay, and now I'm going to make sure it's white. And I got a whole bunch of effect filters happening here. I'm going to hide them so I don't have to scroll through everything. And here's my Lumetri color. Now this is kind of new. So I'm going to get to right where my hand is fully outreached. And I'm going to hit create an elliptical mask. And I'm going to make it, kind of fit. Going to make it kind of look like it's emanating from the light. This is about, and again, size and style, it's going to depend on the type of effect you want. I'm going to keep it fairly large, but I'm going to go really big on the feathering. So the feathering is this is going to be a direct effect, and then this is going to how much it tapers off. Actually, going to probably even go a little bit bigger. Because remember, when it gets to the edge, it's at 0%. So I'm going to have a rather large fair. Okay. Now, a couple things I'm going to do. I'm going to start with the color wheels, and I'm going to take off face detection. And I'm going to really crank up the light to be a lot more orange. And you can see it right in the circle. It's getting a little more orange, but then I'm going to go to the mids. It's even becoming oranger, and it's getting oranger around my face, and then even on my shadows, and now it's decently orange. Again, if you're ever unsure, oh, never mind. Forget I just said that. The other thing I can do is I can crank up the amount of color, so I can really kind of saturate it and pull these way up. And then I'm going to go back to, and those are my color wheels. I'm going to go back to basic, and I'm going to play with saturation and kind of make it even more, increase that color even more. And then I'm going to also maybe make it look a little bit brighter by increasing the highlights and the exposure. Maybe not too much. If I crank the exposure too high, it gets rid of that color. So I really want to kind of make it look like I have this brightness happening to me. The problem is I need to keyframe it to go on and off. Now, keyframing with the mask is going to be a little bit easier. And where you do that is we're going to keyframe the path and the opacity. So that's right where it got exposed, right here. Oops, right here. And I'm going to click on mask path and hit the stopwatch and also opacity. As the fireball travels away from me, I'm going to have the path also travel away from me. So I'm going to go back to the path here and now just slide it kind of out of the way. And so now if I kind of, the light also, the color correction, which is recreating like a light effect, is also following there. Now I'm going to go backwards to where it starts to emanate from my hand. I'm going to pull it back here. And then I'm also going to pull down the opacity. So I've already keyframed it. I'm going to pull it all the way down. So now, there you go. It's dark and it brightens out. Now I'm going to do a little cheat. I could make another color mask and another filter. I'm not going to. I'm just going to kind of, the opacity is off right now. So I'm going to slowly pull my path back. Oops. The opacity is not off. As it falls away, I'm going to also, go back here. I'm going to pull the opacity. I'm going to keyframe here, move over one more keyframe, and now pull the opacity down. And with that opacity down, now I can kind of, it doesn't matter where I move it, it doesn't have any effect because the opacity is at 0. And I'm going to have a flamethrower about to emerge, so I'm going to get it right. That's where I should have a nice bright light happening again. Get that. I can also increase the size because this one's maybe a little bit bigger. And then I will keyframe. Oops. My keyframe here. It's already keyframe here. I'm going to scoot it back a little. Keyframe it at opacity 0. So I'm just going to add this little white tick, and I'm going to go back to that spot where I enlarged it and crank that up. I might need to backtrack one more time. Where's that mask? Ooh. Oh yeah, we're good. So that light comes, and then again, as it travels away, so this time I kind of hold it, so I'm going to key it, and then the flamethrower travels off, and again, I'm going to have the mask follow it, so that way the kind of light dissipates from left to right. And then sorry about that, the bell rang, and so once I get it off screen, I'm going to pull the opacity down, the mask opacity back down to 0% while it's off screen. That way I can move it about and doesn't see it. So while I'm doing my sword, I'm going to do another mask for my sword in a second, but we have a little burst over here where I'm taking off. So while I'm whopping around my sword, I can just move the mask, and it's at 0. Oops, I'm at 0% opacity. So I can kind of just put it in position at any point in time, and then right before the flame takes off, I'm going to add some keys here. So I want to make sure it's right there, and I think I'm going to activate. I'm going to just make a keyframe right here so that stays put, and then I'm going to make a opacity keyframe right here, and then a few frames over, 2, 3. Before I actually see the fire, it would be cool to actually see the glow from the fire, right? So what's happening now is the glow is slowly emerging up before you even see the fire. So it kind of hints that there's something happening off screen, which adds a nice little effect to it. And then I don't even have to keyframe this part of the path because the whole picture is being keyframed. So if I were to hit my position, you'll notice the edge of the frame of my footage is pulling up. So I don't have to even move my mask. If I click down here with the mask, so I don't have to keyframe it at the end because it stays within the frame that's already keyframed, which is helpful. So there you go. So that's doing that's keyframing the lighting or a glow for the effects. Now, with the lightsaber, it's going to be a little bit different. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to grab a fresh filter. So I'm going to go back here to effects. There's effects. And I'm going to go back to video filters. I'm going to go back to color correction. I'm going to grab another Lumetri color. I could also copy and paste it. I could also do a few other tricks, but I'll just get a fresh one. So I have a second Lumetri color. And I'm going to hide that so you can't see it. And then so now I have two Lumetri colors. You can rename it, right? So this one could be like sword glow, and the other one could be glow, and the other one could be fire glow, right? Right click, rename. That way I can keep track of them. Someone asked how to do that. Simple right click does the trick. And then this time for my sword, I'm going to show you a feature that kind of works and kind of doesn't work. So I have my sword up here. It's not the best animation. I'm not 100% with it, but another thing that's going to really help with that sword is if I click on Lumetri color, I'm going to make another ellipse here on the new Lumetri color sword glow. I'm gonna make it kind of follow the sword. I'm gonna actually make it circle closer around the hand. I'm gonna make it rather large, something like that. I'm gonna make a nice big feather off again, and maybe even pull out the expansion, which kind of gives you another. And then actually, I'll pull that. So I'm gonna pull it so it tracks here, but it expands the glow more like that. So now I have three circles. The fade off, the expansion, it's gonna track in here. Tracking is where we're gonna get to. But let's make it blue. So I'm gonna go to my color wheels here and I'm gonna give it a blue glow. And you don't see much for a second. I'm also gonna crank up saturation. Crank it for the midtones. I'm turning bluer already. And also the shadows. I have this nice blue glow happening around me, right? That part's not blue, this part is. Again, I could play with the basics as well. I can make myself get a little brighter, increasing the exposure a little bit. Oop, too exposed, something like that maybe. Or just kind of increasing the highlights so it's a little bit brighter around the sword. The sword's creating glow. I might have made my fall off a little too much. Let's see. So let's grab this. Grab this expansion. Pull up the expansion a little bit. Maybe decrease my feather. Something like that. Still more constant. There. So you can see kind of like the lightsaber is having this effect. By holding it, it's creating this nice even glow around me. Boop. Look at that. Like that. I can also rotate it. I need to. Okay. Maybe that's too much. I made that a little too intense. We'll do something like that. There you go. Yeah. Again, because it's the glow, it's not the actual object. You can be a little sloppier with it, but it was just too much glow happening there. All right. There is a neat feature here where you can get the mask to actually. You don't have to keyframe it every frame. You could try to track it. However, we have my skin tone is very similar to my shirt tone, which is very similar to the khakis I'm wearing. It would be better if there was a contrast here. So there's a lot of similarity in color, which is going to make it harder to track. I cross over my body here, it gets a little confused as to where to track. So this button right here where it says play, I'm going to choose position, scale, and rotation. And when I hit play, it's going to try to figure out how to track my hand. And it did a reasonably good job there. And then it said, oh, you want me to track the head? I'll track the head, right? It's tracking this point on my body, not my hand, okay? So I'm gonna hit undo. And what I probably need to do is, what might happen is if I declare it on the hand here first, it might track it better. So I'm going to grab it, and I'm gonna have a little bit of a rotation here, something like that. And let's see what happens when I play it backwards, how good it works. That's actually not bad, but then it loses control. I'm basically moving too fast. There's too many parameters. It's trying. It's really trying. It's catching it sometimes and not other times. So that didn't work too well either. It's off track again. Right? It got confused. So I'm going to hit undo. I'm going to bring this back. So there's one more thing I can try and do, which is track by frames. So I could just go left one frame. So I'm not moving it every frame. And if I go frame by frame, it tends to slow down. And maybe I need to encourage a little bit. I'm going to just leave it there. That's not bad. And then if I go slower, and just every frame or once in a while, it needs kind of a re-encouragement. So I'm just going to be like, you know what? You need to be more like that. And then it's going to really get lost for a second because I'm behind myself. That's okay. I'm going to play with opacity when it's all done. So I'm just left clicking here, and it's completely lost because it's behind my body, so it doesn't know where to go. That's okay. Let's help that. Here's where I'm going to turn the opacity down later. I'm just going to keyframe through it until I get to this side, and I'll get this guy back here. Like, oops, didn't mean to make it bigger. Right about there. Let's see how well it does now when I go frame by frame. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying. It's kind of a combination between auto and it grabbed onto my elbow. I kind of directed it towards my elbow. Oh no. I'm really zoomed in here. There you go. Get a little bit bigger. Bigger. Try to get back on that hand. And track by track. And you can see it's falling off, so get it back. And it's gonna follow. And now it's following it okay. Going frame by frame. And so I have to left click, but I'm not being as precise. Maybe pull it down a little bit more here. And again, the thing is dwindling. So I'm going to play with the opacity in a second, but that's good. I'm going to go back to the beginning and go the other direction. Remember, you can travel between keyframes with these left and right triangles. And now I'm going to track forward and see how well it does into the same process. So this is kind of like a half manual, half automatic transition. And it always seems to have a problem when it goes in front of my body because the contrast is not enough for it to track. It gets confused. But that's okay. We just help it. So here you go. And now let's see. Keep going. Got a little rotation going here. Not that it matters too much. Get that hand. It's so small. Ugh. Make it a little bigger. What's happening is, doesn't really matter. There. Just want to get that hand tool. It's tracking it all right. Needs a help every once in a while. Yeah, so I've made this a little too bright. So I'm gonna change the opacity in a second. I kept seeing that. I'm just keep clicking forward frame by frame, and if I notice it's a little too far off, It's getting there. So you can individually keyframe it like you did with the sword, or you can do it this way. The problem was I made it a little bit too bright, so I'm gonna go back to that. I'm gonna decrease the base opacity by about that. Was that 50%? Yeah, 60%. And then I'm gonna keyframe it at certain points where it's on the front of my body, not in the back. So go through here, it's behind me now. So I'm gonna make a keyframe for the opacity right about here. Key. And then while it's behind me, like it should be, the front of my body should be highlighted, but not that. So I'm gonna turn this way down. Maybe reposition it like so, but then it comes back. I'm gonna turn it way back up. I think I was at like 62 or something. There you go. So it's on, and then keyframe it so that it turns off. So right about here, I'm gonna make a key. And again, I'm going fast. You can definitely fine tune this more. So it's off. I don't have a light, and then when the lightsaber comes, it gets glowy, and then when it goes behind me, it turns off. I think I accidentally 26%. I want to get rid of that keyframe. There you go. And now it's going. I want to keyframe this back up. And back up to 60, something like that. There we go. I have these additional keys here. Let's see. So, obviously made a problem, but that's okay. Remember, if you're getting bored in this part, just skip forward. You don't have to watch me key everything, but you get the idea. Okay. You could get a little, like, if you wanted to, if you thought it was too bright there, again, you can readjust the colors, yada, yada, yada. But that's pretty good. So that's how you track the glows to kind of really embed your effects. Again, don't forget to hit save. You know, you might want to render in and outs while that's rendering. So we have done, just to kind of go through it, we've done the basics, and then we added that key to kind of go behind me. We've added a shadow, and now we've tracked the glowingness of the fire and the swords so that it follows, and we've done that by tracking with a mask. Now we're getting to the easy part. That was the hardest thing we're going to do. This colors mask, and I know I jammed through it. You'll spend a little more time. So next, just wait for that to be done. I gave you a bunch of assets as well that are sound effects. Those are on the pickup drive. The key to adding sound effects is to put them lower than you think. Usually, amateur special effects artists, they put in sound effects that are a little too loud. Yeah, that works. Perfect. It's not perfect, but it demonstrates what we need to do. All right, so going back to my assets, this part's gonna be easy. I have a whole bunch of different sounds. So for the flame arrow sound, I'm gonna use the same sound effect for my fireball and for me taking off. Similar effects. I'm gonna do a filter on this one here so they sound a little bit different. Oops, I forgot to key off my, going back here for a second, I forgot to turn off the glow for my sword. So at the very end, let me do a sword glow, let me go to opacity, I forgot to turn it off. So I go wah wah, and then right here, last thing before it disappears, right about there, keyframe it on at 62%, and then a few frames over, use my wheelie, wheel, 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 and then key it off at 0. Bam. There you go. Okay. All right, back to sound effects. So here's my flame arrow sound. I'm gonna do in and out. I, O, take this, plop it down. Sometimes it's nice to lead with the sound. Sometimes the sound comes a little bit, so you're just gonna be tweaking, and that's a little too early. I'm just gonna slide it a little over to the left. This is where you're gonna wanna take snap off. This little magnet, or just press regular S. Command S is save, but regular S turns off snapping. And sometimes it's a little tough to adjust these things. So I'm gonna turn it down. Turn it way down. Perfect. lots of these sound effects come in really loud, and that's totally fine. Next thing is I have a flamethrower, and I have a different sound effect for that one. I have a torch, and again, just in and out. Actually, might not even need an in and out for this one. Grab the little sound bar, and this one is going to be right here. And again, it's really loud. Turn it way down. Use your judgment. A little louder than that. And it got really laggy. Come on. That'll work. Nice. I can also fade that out, right, with my pen tool, because it kind of disappears. There you go. And now I got my lightsaber. And there's a whole bunch of different lightsaber effects on this same track, but you probably want it. Ooh, that's loud. So I already did the out point for the closing of it, so I'm just going to grab that. And that's at the end of the sword, somewhere around here. And then for the beginning part, it opens up. And then 1, 2, 3. So let's see if those 3 work really well. 1, 2, 3, whoa, whoa, whoa. And I'm just going to pull that down on track 2, because I have to kind of layer my flamethrower in the closing of it. Now, what's going to happen is these sound effects don't match up perfectly. So my sword opens right there. That's where I want the sword to just kind of turn on. So let's see. Right? So it's a little, and then, oops, that's a little too. It's a little off, right? The womp, womp, womp is a little off. So what I'm going to do is I'll turn it down first. It's still a little loud. I'm going to cut it. See? Cut. And now this, so the opening, you're going to hear the womp and the opening kind of overlap a little bit. There you go. That was actually lucky guess on the first try. That was great. You might, I got really solid with that one. You might want to fine tune it. If you wanted to even cut these even more, right, and even get them perfectly aligned, you could. But for all intents and purposes, that worked out remarkably fast. You're probably going to have a little bit more of a challenge to that. A good practice is to kind of fade them in and out really shortly if you want. So with the pen tool, quickly fade them in and out if you feel like you need to do it. If you don't want the effect just to kind of jump in. So that's another thing you could do, which I'm not demonstrating right now. So I've added the sound effects. If you wanted to, I provided Guile's theme music. I've also, I think Link. I think these are all Link sound effects. Yeah. That's Link. That's Link from Legend of Zelda chopping around, and there should be a song. And if you wanted to add that for Street Fighter, and I don't have it right here, but I do have it on the desktop. So let's just go grab it. It might be Mr. G Assets. Is there a Guile? Torch, sound Guile. Oop. Oh, there it is. Guile theme. Oh, maybe I missed it. And I'm just going to plop that on another layer down here. Might need to add another track. Right click, add track. And you don't have to have the Guile theme song. If you want to have whatever song you want, go for it. It just adds that one more little layer of fun to this whole project. And that's what we're trying to do, is have some fun here. So it has a little weird thing, a clip at the beginning. So I'm actually going to cut it like that. And then maybe even just add a cross dissolve. Maybe shorten it a little bit, like by making 12 frames. And now this is probably way too loud, something like that. And then cut it, obviously, at the end. C. Oop. Maybe delete. And so it still sounds loud. Pull it down a little bit more. Let's see. And it's getting very stuttery, of course. That's because we're not rendering it out. But those sounds great. Maybe pull this down a little bit more. Just want it subtle. There you still hear the sound effects now. Adding the layer of song plus the sound effects really helps blend all the sounds together. You could also add background noise. You could also do all those other things. All right. Just one more little trick you could do is another thing is, since I'm kind of going this video game theme, I can make this all look pixely. So another thing you can do for your special effects is really kind of dive into these all these different sort of effect filters. There's a bunch here for you to play with. Remember, if you want to do a general application to all of them, you're going to do something called an adjustment layer. We've done this before, but just to kind of do it again, I'm going to go to File, New, I'm going to choose an adjustment layer. That gives me the standards. I'm going to plop it in on top of everything and make sure it covers everything. And now with this adjustment layer, I can take any sort of effect. So the effect I'm going to play with is under Distort, and it's Mosaic. That's not under Distort, it's under Stylize. There's Mosaic, and I'm going to drag Mosaic onto the adjustment layer, and it makes that's a little too pixely, right? So now under the adjustment layer, I have horizontal blocks and vertical blocks. If I wanted to make it look more like a Nintendo game, like an 8-bit or Atari game, I can probably try like 88 pixels for the whole thing, and that makes me look very video gamey, perhaps too much. Then maybe I want to do the NES system, maybe graduate it up to like 112 or something like that. Right, and now I look more NES, and let's say, now I want to go Super Nintendo. Someone might be saying these bits aren't right, but now I look pixely, but you still kind of can see a lot more details. This also helps kind of create that effect of now I look really embedded in the system. I've created myself as a video game. You could do other things. You don't have to do Mosaic. There's other fun effects to play with. I just wanted to show you some potential. Last but not least, whether or not you use an adjustment layer or not for your own project, you have a bunch of different layers here. If I were to do some sort of cross dissolve here for this one, this one, this one, and this one, right? The cross dissolve, the fading in happens weird. Notice you're seeing the picture, and then I'm still transparent. You want to fade me in all at once. So one other thing you're going to want to do, and this is quite handy, we can use it for other things, is you're going to select everything, and you can do a nested layer. What it does is it collapses all my visual pieces into one thing, and now when I do a cross dissolve, now it just kind of fades me in for everything. I'm just rendering out. It's going to take a while. So instead of the picture coming in a little bit and I'm still semi-transparent with the picture, this treats everything I've just done as one video clip. And that's the last thing you want to do. And that's a right click, and that's called nested sequence or nested layers. That's really handy. We're going to be using that for a lot of different things that we do in the future. It's nesting. Just realized my cross dissolve is probably too long. That's not bad. Perfect. All right. When that's all said and done, you're going to export it out. Command M. There you go. You're going to change this to 1_SFX_ last name. 1_SFX_ last name. And you hit your desktop and save, and you're going to hit export, and that's what gets turned into the thing. And just keep in mind, right? It's an 8-second long video, and it's taking 2 minutes to export, 1 minute to export. Normal other videos have been way quicker. It's because we're doing so much. It's got so many other layers to it. And once that exports out, you are done and good to go. So I hope the second video wasn't too long. We covered a lot. And this is a lot of tools in your palette now when you do your special effects. So please refer back to this on how to do multiple sorts of things. So now start thinking about what special effect you want to do when finishing this project. Did it finish? So. And that's going to look like this. I'm going to turn off those pixels. Good job. job.